Well, blessings to you as we come to you with your daily encouragement. Now, we had a very popular story about reconciliation on Sunday, the story of the prodigal son, a gracious father, a wayward son, and a unforgiving older brother were brought together at a meal when they put aside their differences, and they were great differences. The story does not, how should I say, poo-poo the differences that were between these brothers, but it was the sacrifice of the lamb, the fatted calf that brought them together. And it was God showing that this is what reconciliation looks like. And for the people of Israel, the new people that were allowed to cross over into the land, God was making them into a new people. They had to cross over and by the Ark of the Covenant. They had to go through the law that not only told them the truth of God's righteousness, but also convicted them even as they go through and place the rock that they picked underneath the ark to be a reminder that God is their victory. Now, the people of God are about ready to make war on Jericho, one of the most famous battles, and unfortunately, they would not always have success because they failed to turn to the Lord in other cases. But as we continue the story of preparation for the Battle of Jericho, let us remind ourselves that it was God who brings them through, and it was God who continues to bring us through the waters of the Jordan, symbolized now even by our baptism, where we are birthed into a new people. We hear that from 1 Corinthians 10. Paul equates the story to our own story, our own baptism. Let's read on in Joshua 4, beginning with verse 14. On that day, the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all of Israel, and they stood in awe of him as they stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. Now remember, the people that wander for 40 days and 40, or not 40 days, 40 years, were not permitted to enter into the land. And Moses advocated for him, and Moses himself was not allowed to enter the land. And so this is a new generation, a new Israel that has been formed and birthed on the other side of the Jordan water. And so the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant to come up out of the Jordan. And Joshua therefore commanded the priests, come out of the Jordan. And when the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord came up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and flowed on all its banks as before. The people come out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal, east of the border of Jericho. Those 12 stones which they had taken out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal, saying, the Israelites, when your children ask your parents in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let them children know Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you crossed over, as the Lord your God did at the Red Sea, which he dried up until we crossed over, so that the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. Now remember, there were two crossings that happened. There was the crossing of the Red Sea that is brought up in this passage, and there was the crossing over of the Jordan River. Both of them were miraculously performed by the people of God to remind them that this is not just a dry spell, This is an act of God that's bringing them out of slavery into the wilderness and out of the wilderness into the promised land. Two crossings. And like I said, Paul compares not only the Red Sea crossing, but this crossing to baptism. Now, maybe don't trust Paul. Well, you can also trust John the Baptist. When John the Baptist was beginning his new people, his new repentant people, he was baptizing not just in any river, he was baptizing in the Jordan River. Now, if we go all the way back to Genesis, water also symbolized chaos. And it was the Lord in Genesis 1 that separated the waters above from the waters below and created the place for life. And so when the people of Israel walked into the Jordan water, they were not walking in water, they were in dry land. They had had their place, their order cut in a way that no dam could do. Well, you can make dams, but still the bottom of it is going to be wet. It was a place of God's miraculous hand. And so it was set up as a place of remembrance. Now, during the reforms of Josiah, the king, some of these places were taken up. The shrine of Gilgal was taken up, so was the Kadush that had rescued the people of Israel from the serpents that they looked up and were set free from. And part of the concern was that they were taking these objects as talisman rather than reminders of God, who we are called to seek. And that's what happens to ritual after a while. You start trusting the ritual rather than trusting God. And that we all do that. I don't care if you're the most low church person that doesn't like ritual or you're the most high church person. We all can take a time or a place or a period of our life and say that's when God worked, and we don't trust that God's working today, and we don't try everything new. Now there'll be some more details that that Joshua does. He circumcises the new group of people. They are to be the new Israel. All these in preparation for the fight at Jericho. And he also has them celebrate the Passover in Gilgal, the first time they celebrate the Passover in the Promised Land. All of these, both rituals and looking back, anticipate on moving forward. And that's what we're called to do in Lent. We're to take our historic events, whether it be our baptism, whether it be times where we do this in remembrance of me by taking Holy Communion, where we, in a very symbolic way, but also in a very real way, are celebrating the reconciliation of different parties, not unlike the celebration for the prodigal son by the very loving father and the invitation of the maybe stubborn, if not hard-hearted, older brother. Oh, he had his reasons for not joining the celebration. But for the prodigal son, it meant life. For the father, it meant the first stage of reconciliation. And he represents Jesus on the cross, trying to bring his wayward children back together again. You see, these separations aren't permanent. They are for a certain time and place. But God is working together something new, something greater. And so remind ourselves of that in these stories from the Old Testament and the crossing of the people of God at Gilgal. God bless you today. We trust that these continue to be words of encouragement. Take care. God bless. We'll see you next time.